In many gospel stories, especially in the Gospel of Luke, it is unexpectedly the so-called sinner who opens their heart to Jesus' message of love and liberation, and who believe. Those who assume themselves to be righteous, they don't really think that Jesus' message even applies to them. They don't understand the appeal. Why is it that thousands of people gather to see Jesus, to hear him speak, to touch his clothes? As far as the righteous are concerned, Jesus does not behave as is expected of a religious leader. He displays a curious combination of misbehaving and breaking rules, as well as being pretty big-headed. Who is this wandering so-called Son of God who thinks that he has the authority to teach in the synagogue, cast out demons, heal people on the Sabbath, and forgive sins? But the crowd really loves him. So a righteous man like Simon, the Pharisee, decides to invite Jesus into his house and to see for himself. And what happens? A sinner of the worst kind, a woman, a prostitute even. She crashes the party and displays what can only be described as crazy behavior, washing Jesus' feet with her tears. And let's assume that Jesus' feet really were dusty from the road, and then a realistic amount of tears mixes with the dust, making them not clean, but rather muddy, right? And so she dries that mess with her hair, kisses the feet in public, and then anoints them, not the head, but the feet, the muddy feet, with fragrant oil. So now Simon knows for sure that this Jesus cannot be a prophet of any kind, because if he were, he would not have allowed the woman to do this crazy stuff. The author of the Gospel of Luke makes sure that we know that Simon says these things within himself. That means he thinks these words. He does not speak them. How disconcerting must it be for Simon that Jesus replies to him as if he had shared his thoughts aloud. Just in the moment when Simon was sure this guy is fake, Jesus reads his mind and confuses him again. At the end of the story, we do not know if this was Simon's come to Christ moment. He is not the important person here. The woman is. Simon is just the one who sets the stage for the important encounter. So let's turn to her, the woman. The words used to describe her, a woman in the city who was a sinner, really makes it quite sure that she was a sex worker. And the way Simon reacts makes it quite clear that he thinks of her as a fallen woman. You know, a woman who had choices and made the wrong ones. She could have gone to university, right? I mean, gotten herself a degree, could have a great independent life. I can see it in my mind. Nazareth College for independent women, right? Or she could have married into a good family, caring for her rich husband and her adorable children. Instead, she chose to sell sex for money. Or maybe not. Maybe I'm not fair to Simon. Maybe he was well aware that her fate was the fate of a slave or an orphan, a street girl who most likely was sold into sex slavery. A woman who, without doubt, had next to no choices available to her. And still, she is called a sinner, as if she had made a choice for sin. But what we see her do today is just the opposite. This woman is making a choice for Jesus. She comes with a jar of oil in her hands, planning to honor Jesus And then she notices that against all rules of hospitality, Simon has not provided for his guests to wash his feet, as is customary in this place and time. So she improvises and shows the hospitality that Simon did not think to be worth his time. We can see how Simon's entitlement, his sense of entitlement, really messes him up. He's not hospitable towards Jesus. He's not compassionate towards the woman. He's not self-aware at all. And it seems that he's not capable of grasping who Jesus really is. In Simon's defense, large parts of the piety of the time were organized around the idea of purity. Purity is a well-known concept in many religions. You are pure when you belong to the in-group. You're impure when you're an outsider. You become impure for a time, even as an insider, when you eat certain foods, mix certain foods, prepare certain foods wrongly, have sex, touch a dead body, are sick. All these fairly normal activities and conditions render you impure and require ritual cleansing. So your religious life centers around the idea of purity, how to maintain it, how to restore it. Clearly, a person who has sex all the time, like a prostitute, can never be pure. The same is true for a chronically ill person. You are blind, you're lame, you have a mental condition, you are rendered permanently impure. If this is how you think and what your faith means to you, then Jesus' message and ministry must truly be very disturbing. Jesus does not care about purity at all. He disregards all dietary restrictions and declares all food to be clean. He eats with sinners. He touches all sorts of impure people and even dead bodies. He heals people who have been sick for so long, surely they must be impure to the core by now. Jesus heals on the Sabbath. He builds relationships with women and Gentiles and tax collectors. This is horrifying to a religious leader of the time. This goes against everything they believe in. This cannot be right. And yet, by disregarding the purity laws, Jesus is reforming his religion. Because to put purity first is what is not right. A belief system which excludes people is not based on the biblical fact that we are all made in God's image, all of us. It is not based on God's great commandment to love your neighbor as yourself. It was an important part of Jesus' ministry to break through that system of purity and to put love into the center of faith instead. Love for all people, and especially for those who are excluded. Make no mistake, we are still a work in progress. I invite you to think just for a moment about who you, right now, maybe without even thinking, believe to be impure. Purity is a powerful ideology. And to be able to put sin on those who we define as impure, away from ourselves, far away, and then to just close the door and say, thank God, we are safe. That is a mighty temptation. We fall for it all the time. We call ourselves followers of Jesus, and then we build our own systems of purity and impurity. And before you know it, we say, we cannot do business with these kind of people, and we cannot allow them to have communion in our churches, and we would never invite them to our homes. No, because they are sinners, and we are not. and somehow we think we need to protect ourselves from them. And why this is very human behavior, it is not what Jesus stands for. To the contrary, Jesus fought these exclusionary customs with tooth and nail. His whole ministry is based on the idea of love and inclusion of all. Just pick up the book, and read like 1 or 2 chapters of the gospel stories. You will find at least one moment where the religious leaders conspire against Jesus because he is challenging their worldview. Who is he to forgive sins? How can he eat or heal on the Sabbath? His teachings are treacherous and we need to arrest him. But it is too dangerous because the people, they love Jesus. They love the message Jesus has to share. And make no mistake, even Jesus' disciples are taken aback when he talks with women and blesses children. Nobody is safe from these kind of thoughts. Jesus' teachings are radically inclusive. They're not only a challenge for Simon and the Pharisees and the disciples 2,000 years ago, they still are a challenge for you and me today. If our assumptions are not challenged from time to time when we read the Bible, when we listen to the sermon, when we talk with each other, when we live our lives, then we're not getting it. Faith in Jesus is a transformative force. It was so when he walked on earth, and it still is so today. And the path of love for all is not easy, far from it. But when Jesus breaks through into your heart, and you get it, you see a glimpse of the kingdom, how life could be on earth as it is in heaven, and how we can get there step by step, following Jesus. Then we understand that the power of love is without limit and is at the center of faith. Jesus, radical, inclusive faith. Amen.